What's up, everybody? Welcome into another week of the Cannabiz Conversation Podcast. I am your fortunate and lucky host, Sean Welsh. I have to tell you, each and every time we get to do this, it is a serious pleasure for me because anyone who doesn't know this, I handpick the guests. Yes, me. This isn't somebody else doing it. I talk directly with people that I want to interview. And today is one of those moments that when this individual said yes to me, I was like, oh yes, this is so cool, because I really care about what's going on. I care about the work that they're doing, and so we will get into that. But before we do, remember this year on the show, fortunate to have sponsors, and today's sponsor, my friend Peter Schweda and the Colorado Seed Inc. team. They're focused on step one, people, for the cultivator. That is the seed. They have the best genetics rolling. They take care of pairing the correct strains with the cultivator's facilities. They care more about the process than most. Give it a shot. Head over to Colorado Seed Inc. and shop their genetics and tell them what you think. Thank you so much to Peter and his team. We appreciate it. All right, enough of that. Let's move into what special guests we have today. Ashley Manning, COO, Cannabis Research Coalition. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Sean.
Thank you for agreeing to be on our little show. I do truly appreciate it. So we like to kick off all shows by getting into the origin story that had brought you to this beautiful plant. So please, Ashley, tell us, where did you meet this wonderful plant?
She is a wonderful plant. All my life I've struggled with PTSD, chronic pain. I've had a little over 11 surgeries, including my back, femur, foot, hand, several surgeries, which had led to polypharmacy, being on the whole gamut of pharmaceuticals, nice concoction of things for the past 17 years prior to discovering cannabis. A friend told me about CBD and said, you just need to be on CBD. And I laughed a little bit, not understanding. The introduction of CBD isolate itself in a tincture, started sleeping better, started having less aches and pains. And then she said, you need to graduate to smoking some cannabis now and go for the good stuff. And I dismissed it a little bit, but then I did start consuming edibles, a small dose. After probably 3 weeks, I was just feeling better, noticing my pain was getting better, even that I didn't realize my pain could completely disappear, to the point where the hardware in my spine, the hardware in my femur was actually backing out of my bone. Doctor said I would have to have this hardware the rest of my life, almost like a miracle. And at that point, I was like, there's something here to this plant that's actually helping. And while I was coming off pharmaceuticals, I was titering myself down off the pharmaceuticals. I was working in the emergency room, and there's a lot of trauma that comes in through the ER. There's a lot of leaving with bag of pharmaceuticals, a lot of prescriptions, a lot of repeat patients coming through the door, revolving door. And all I kept thinking every single day as I'm coming off the meds is, this is where I need to be. This is real medicine. I forget working in the hospital, the healthcare system. I need to be somehow, some way working with this plant if I want to be a true patient advocate, which is how I felt I was working in the emergency room. I resigned my position, continued to work on therapy, one-on-one therapy, because coming off pharmaceuticals comes with its own challenges, mental health challenges. And while you're balancing that, it's important to stay in therapy. So while I resigned from working in the hospital, worked on therapy, and connected myself with people in the San Diego, California marketplace to see how I could get involved in the cannabis space, I didn't care what I was doing, but I really felt honed in on the cultivation aspect. If I was going to be an advocate, I really need to understand how the plant was grown, how it was taken care of, and how it was processed throughout the supply chain before it ever reached the patient or the consumer. And I was lucky enough to find an internship working at a cultivation facility with Dr. Allison Justice. Let me back up. Actually, before that, I was working with a black market legacy grower and distributor delivery company under Prop 215 in California. We went through a raid, gave me a little bit of a bad taste for cannabis, but when I found the internship right after that, that was a licensed facility, vertically integrated, led by doctors and researchers, and to me, that felt more suited to where I needed to be anyhow. And took that internship, unpaid internship, worked under Dr. Justice as her cultivation intern for about a year. And then I moved on to working in manufacturing because I wanted to know what happened after it was grown, learn how it's processed. And then I went on to working in sales and retail and learned each part of the supply chain. What I quickly realized was there's no standards in this place. I'm used to a healthcare system that's heavily regulated. Here I am, there's zero standards. Like people aren't wearing hairnets, like things are getting in food, just gross. And let me respect the industry too. This was prior to full recreational adult use, before these strict regulations came into place. And after realizing there wasn't much standards, regulations, I felt that with my experience that I had working in different supply chain, I could be a value add to an organization that is creating standards or working with regulators. So I started working with a trade association where we wrote national standards with the industry, and with our government relations team, we drove those standards to regulators to say, this is what effective policy should look like. My input was very valuable to the organization because of the connections that I had within the space. I was able to say, what's the problem we want to tackle right now? Oh, we want to tackle packaging and labeling. We want to tackle cybersecurity. I was able to really quickly identify areas that needed improved in the industry based on California regulations. And then with my ability to get things done and keep things moving, we were able to really drive those standards to regulators. We helped advise on the Vermont cannabis policies, and that so far, we're now 2.5 years, I think, into Vermont. I feel that Vermont has had a really good structure set up, and I'd like to tip my hat to myself and the rest of the team who helped advise the policymakers in Vermont on effective policymaking. Did that for about 4 years. Took a little stint in media because I realized the contacts and network that I had as well. Media was a great opportunity for me to leverage the brands and everybody who really needs to be elevated. Because going back to my mission, I want to keep in my passion. I want to keep bringing this medicine to the people. And another core component that's missing is that translation between the product and the brands to the consumers. So how do we get their brand in front of people? There wasn't much media. Podcasts had sort of taken off, but worked in media for a couple years. And then now I have joined Dr. Allison Justice. I packed up, said, forget California. Dr. Justice asked if I could come and help her. She's the founder of Cannabis Research Coalition, and asked if I would be her co-founder at the CRC and essentially take all the skill sets that I have in networking, bringing people together, helping to write effective policy, and also combining that with research. Now we've identified another core gap in order for us to advance the industry. What's missing? Research. We're not profitable. Well, why aren't we profitable? Because we're using outdated cultivation techniques that go beyond ancient times. We need to start being more efficient in our techniques, what we're putting in our products, while also fine-tuning that to make a quality product. And we can do that through research. It's hard to have a cultivator do their own internal R&D at their facility. They're focused on yield and sales, and not so much how can we make this process more efficient. So CRC exists in order to bridge that gap between the research as well as the industry. So we work with universities. We have partnerships with Clemson University, Alabama State, Louisiana State, and then our partnerships with the industry. We hear the industry's challenges. We get the funding from the industry. Those are our members, and we apply that to the research that's needed based on the priorities the industry tells us we need. And so here we are today at the CRC. We are expanding our facility as well, which I'll get onto all that on, I think, the second part I'd like to talk about then. But that's how I got to where I am today at the CRC. That's a little bit about my origin stories.
I love it. I love it. So you were talking about, can you give us an age range when you found cannabis and gave up pharmaceutical or tried to move away? How old were you when that happened?
22.
22 years old. Okay.
Yeah. I've been on the pharmaceuticals since 11 years old, which is sad. Who puts children on these pharmaceuticals? And to this day, I take a pediatric dose of an antidepressant, and cannabis. 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams a day of an edible, smoke a joint. I am happy as pie, no pain. I have all the hardware removed out of my spine, all the hardware removed out of my femur. And I mean, it is a miracle. This is a miracle plant. It gives me the goosebumps to think about, because you lose belief when you're in that deep depression and going through those struggles, that it's hard to believe that there is a miracle out there. And I feel that this plant was put here on this earth for a reason, and that's to help people.
Yeah, I mean, I got to tell you, I can't see how you wouldn't be doing the work you're doing, right? Given your story, given what you've been through, and trying to bring that to people and trying to make that, a part of the discussion. And I think that part of being an advocate is having gone through something, right? And having said to yourself, I was this, now I'm this, or this is how I looked at it. And I don't think we need to label anything. I think the point of the matter is that you've now become in tune to what you need for you and what makes you feel better. That isn't pharmaceutical. And you're right. I'm not a parent, but the idea of putting children on pharmaceuticals. Recently on LinkedIn, there was a question from somebody. I think it was even Willie McKenzie. It was like, hey, is it cool to give kids, low dose cannabis to deal with pain or whatever? And it was something that I thought to myself, again, not a parent, but like, if it were in a responsible way, in the same way that you give kid a, Tylenol, codeine or whatever, I don't know. I have no idea, but it seemed fair. But I think I was definitely in the minority of that discussion. But again, it seemed just as fair to introduce to the discussion as introducing, an opiate to a 12-year-old, I guess.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting thing to kind of watch and see how people take the discussion and move through it. So one of the other things that I put down here, you said that the raid put a taste in your mouth, which, they tend to do that. Unfortunately, Ashley, they really do. I happened to be in a facility that happened in Denver. This was in 2004, and it happened, and it was downright jacked up because I wasn't there for that. I was there to take a transfer of a couple of plants that I had been asked to move out of facility and move to my own facility. And that's what I was trying to do. And that did not go that way. That was not my afternoon at all. But to your point, it's jarring. I had been in black market my whole life leading up to it. So it wasn't, I think, as jarring as maybe it could have been. But it's scary to think that was, it is still a thing in some cases with, like I said, I live in a prohibition state, but we're surrounded by border states that are not. And it creates this weird interstate thing where you see these things happening because the guy up north's like, I got 10 seeds from Michigan. I'll just put them in my backyard. And then that 10 turns to 20, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know how it goes. You go to grow a little bit of weed. Next thing you know, my wife, she's got a green thumb and we started growing. We were basically told, like, you'll lose, 50% of your clones. It's kind of normal, whatever. Like, don't worry about it, whatever. She had like a 10% die rate. So we ended up with like 90 plants out of 100. And she's like, what do you want me to do? I'm not going to kill them. They're living plants. I'm like, well, what the? I got permits for like 82 of these things. Like, I don't need this. And this is just room one. These guys are all going to grow up and you're going to want to clone these. And I'm screwed. And I mean, I ended up being like 150 deep in my home project before I was like, okay, you need to just stop cloning and I'm going to grow through it. And then we had to move anyways to the prohibition state we live in now. But anyways, Ashley, when you look at cultivation, when you wanted to learn from the best, right? Or from the beginning, from where you needed to see it, what was the glaring difference for you? Because I don't talk to many people who have legacy and, let's call it corporate, facility training, if you will. What was the glaring difference between the two, aside from, as you've already stated, the obvious of hairnets and OSHA type regulation shit? What was the real kind of difference for you?
I mean, everything. Yeah. It was night and day. And day. To an extreme too.
Was it a yield difference? Was it a product difference? Was it a quality difference? Was there anything like that stood out to you? Again, quality. I got buddies in the legacy world. They're like, Sean, you can't screw with our stuff. I'm like, yeah, but you're not using science. You're using mom's recipe, which I love. I love mom's recipe. It's just, I'm a data nerd by trade. So like data and empirical decision-making really makes more sense to me. Is that kind of one of the things you found, was that on the one side, we're using sort of data to fulfill our next move. On the other side, we're still using, the gut? if you will.
Yeah, and that came down to quality. You could see the quality of the legacy flower versus the quality of the flower that was being grown at the licensed facility. Just, post-harvest practices of how you're packaging your product and how it's stored. Most of the product was bleached out in the unlicensed space. Well, in the licensed space, there's packaging and storing requirements and much different.
Yeah.
A huge difference.
But you're glad you got to see both sides, I assume, right? I think that helps give you a depth of understanding of why people on the legacy side feel the way they do and why people on the, manufacturing legit side, if you will, feel the way that they do.
We were still paying taxes. So it was nice on the right. It seems crazy. It's still paying taxes, but on the unlicensed side, we were following as much protocol as we could to a point of where it wasn't a burden on our company, and we were making tons of money, selling a plant and feeling that it was legal. But I think one of the biggest parts that I learned by being in the grow itself was how passionate me personally I am, because taking care of the plant was the same way that I took care of patients in the hospital. Yeah. I would go in, I'd assess the patient or the plant, report back to the doctor what I found, and the doctor would say, do X, Y, and Z, and you go back and do X, Y, and Z and report back to the doctor the findings. And I was like, this is the same concept. But without regulations in place, it's hard to follow that, because everyone's like, well, that's stupid. We're not going to do X, Y, and Z because we don't have to do X, Y, and Z. And you're like, but it's going to make quality product. So, and my history being in a highly regulated market such as healthcare, that's really personal to me. I want to make sure that we're continuing to provide quality medicine to the people, not product that is, old recipes that we know nothing about, of how they're actually when you combust and you're smoking it, what's actually happening.
I will tell you that in some small recesses of my mind, Ashley, science has killed my experience in that regard, because I can't not help but say to myself, oh, what? You know what I mean? Like, what have I done? And look, it's not lost on me, again, living in a prohibition state, what's necessary to do what it is to do to have medicine, to feel better. Before I could, again, we're talking, 1998, 1999, when I first found cannabis at, was I 17, 18 years old, I had migraines and all these other things, and I found it. And I remember thinking, well, how am I going to keep this up? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's already difficult to obtain. It's already this, that. And so the acquisition part for me is what I really like about legal states, right? I like the access. I think it's very, very important that people understand it. However, there's still a lot of education that comes with it, right? So if you haven't used before, right? This is mom, I'm talking to you directly, mom. This is the idea that you go out and you have an edible, and 20 minutes later, I'm sorry, it didn't work. I took another, and you're calling me wanting to call 911. You know what I mean? And that's my problem with us as an industry, looking at it from a consumer perspective. The work you're doing is education based. And for consumers, I know we live in an echo chamber of industries, right? So the industry is talking about how it needs to do better and do better and do better. But the consumer is the one who's like, but I don't get it. I don't understand the difference between THC, THCA, hemp this, hemp that. You and I already talked about it in the pre-show. When my friends come up to me in Wisconsin and they ask me if I've been to the new dispensary, my mind spins out of control in a way that makes me almost mad, because I'm like, dude, you have not been in a dispensary in Wisconsin. They're like, oh yeah, no, right down the street, man. He's on Main Street. He's got all the THC you can handle. And I'm just like, he doesn't. And you know what? What's turning out to be crazy, Ashley, is it turns out he might. It turns out he very well might have actual THC that he is selling as THCA, and the testing and the opportunities to see all that is such a gigantic blind spot. It's just crazy to me. When you see your work, is that part of is the consumer part of you what really drives that passion of the research in kind of what I'm saying here?
Absolutely. It's the consumers primarily, because they need quality product. How is quality product even measured? Who's determining quality? Anybody? Yeah, right? So what we've done, we've partnered with a couple organizations. One is called the Network of Applied Pharmacognosy. with our research, what we do, as well as with some of our partners, we allow the consumers to judge what is quality. A couple of our studies, I'll get into the second part of the show, talking about that study particularly, but allowing the consumers to participate. We do the inputs in cultivation. We make the final product. We send it to the consumers. They rate it and score it. We have certified ganjiers who are rating it and scoring it. And that's how we're determining quality, based on what we're seeing the consumers' feedback, and based on the inputs we're putting in. Okay, so if these inputs are producing a bad effect, then they're blind. The consumers don't know they know they're smoking cannabis, but they don't know how we've altered the inputs of that particular product to get their answers. And so from there, we're able to fine tune the inputs in the cultivation space, as well as work with the cultivator on the industry side to say, these are the inputs that the consumers are saying is creating the best quality, most smokable product.
Yeah.
And then we're able to fine tune that, because we got to keep the cultivator in mind in terms of profitability and increasing their profits itself. So how can we reduce those inputs, saving the cultivator money, increasing their cost, increasing their price per pound, and also create a quality, consistent, smokable product at the same time? We're trying to bridge that industry and consumer together while still making a profitable product. So yes, the consumers are at the forefront of our work and what we do. And especially if we can start helping a lot of these cultivators become more profitable, then they can start focusing, really dialing in even more into quality. Right now, they're just like, we got to produce the biggest yield because we need the biggest return.
Yeah.
Well, you can have the best of both worlds. It's just no one has the time or dedication to the research that's needed to create that. And that's why the CRC exists.
It's powerful in the way that people need the assistance they don't know they need, right? And so when you're in something, you live it. You're in it every single day. You can't really separate from that and say, oh, wait, here's the bigger picture, or here's what I should be focused on. And I think that's a big part for people when they see this. You do a lot in the regulation space. Earlier in the season, we had on Kim Stuck, who Kim's crazy amazing in the way that she wrote like first adult use in Colorado stuff. And she's really a big part of that. To hear, it takes a special human, Ashley. Okay. You, like her, special human. I am not a red tape guy. Okay. I cannot deal with bureaucracy and headaches. I would rather this is going to sound like a capitalist pig, but I'd rather just pay my way out of something, move on with shit, and just continue to do what I want, what I'm trying to do. So if that's research, I'd rather just give whatever politician needs, whatever he needs to be paid to get the fuck out of my way. I'd rather just pay him and have that happen than sit here and be like, well, we got to go this route, this route, this route. You guys do it with passion. You do it with consistency. When it comes to regulation, is it because you know it's needed, because you have passion, or some crazy mix of both?
I'm going to say the crazy mix of both.
Okay, I figured it was kind of
crazy
a
mix
setup
of
because
both.
I can see it, right? You can see that when you talk about it, you're like, look, it has to happen. And I will say, I want to go back to something. You mentioned Vermont, right? You and the team on the Vermont work. I don't know much about Vermont's legalized system. A, I don't live there. But B, and I think most importantly, Ashley, is I don't hear about it. I don't hear about it. It's not like Massachusetts. It's not like Cali. It's not like some of the Colorado guys. There are people making uprisings. There are people having issues. Michigan's another one. But what I don't hear is I don't see Vermont in the main news. I don't see people complaining about the equitable parts of Vermont and what's going on within it. That seems to me to be part of the regulation. So I'll ask you, when new states come on board, does it not just fry your brain that they don't just take, the quietest model, apply, and move on? Why does everyone feel like they have to be different, Ashley?
Well said. And that's what we did at our organization. Was we analyzed the states that had a really crappy program, and we put our opinion on what we felt is crappy based on what the industry was saying. We spent almost 2 years on Vermont's regulations, and because we wanted to make sure we did a good market analysis on what was working, what wasn't, and implement and tweak it to make the best, most equitable and fair regulations that a state could have. I believe that they ended up passing through the farm to table as well model, which is unheard of. They have a great social equity program. Granted, the state is 700,000 people. It's a very small state. So it was really hard to also figure out how many licenses needed to be given out in the state. Otherwise, we're going to have an overproduction of flower, and then we're in a whole nother battle there. So
Which
we
is,
knew
which is
that.
our problem with most legal use, right? At this point, right? And it's part of the federal hangup of the idea of the ship and transfer when new states come on board, like here in the Midwest, it's Minnesota, right? So what does Minnesota do? Well, they go legal in January, but we'll see 7 months, whatever. And so good luck and all will be well going the first. And it seems silly to me because if these were new liquor stores, they'd be loaded to the gills when you open the door, when you change your regulation. It would be set. And I know everyone's so tired of the alcohol cannabis comparison. Find me another one that's been prohibition in my lifetime, not even in my lifetime, in a lifetime that I know people that can speak on, or historians, etc. Sorry, I wish there was something else. I wish I didn't have to make the comparison, but it's life and it's facts, and I'm not here to rewrite history. But Ashley, when it comes to what people are looking at right now, when you look at cannabis versus alcohol, do you see what I mean as far as being prepared for a launch?
Absolutely. On Vermont, and this goes back to what you're saying about alcohol, our government relations officer at that time, he came from the alcohol industry. We took him from, and he helped write standards and regulations for alcohol. We knew that even if we didn't do the exact same model as alcohol, having their knowledge and skills to what worked and what didn't work made the most sense to us as an organization. So we did get some flack on comparing it to alcohol, but Vermont, I mean, I think it's been 2.5 years, and there's been no complaints. And we did a lot of comparisons with alcohol industry.
I don't get what fries people about it. I don't understand why we wouldn't look to places that already have data, already have things they've tried. Cigarette companies had to go through similar advertising blackouts that cannabis does. Alcohol really has never had to live in that space. So you can pull from tobacco, you can pull from alcohol. This idea that we have to create a whole new world because it's cannabis, I just think is a supreme waste of time and resource, which seems to be short in the industry. If you read a LinkedIn post, or if you go on Instagram for 5 minutes. But you talk about the idea of scoring, right? And the idea that you guys present is the idea of the consumer scoring test. Recently, my wife shared with me, I'm not on social media except for LinkedIn, which my nephew's called the old guy stuff. So whatever, doesn't matter. The point is, the wife is on IG. She keeps me hip. And she's scrolling and she said, look, this is the grocery store in Spain. My friend's there. Here's what's going on. And Spain uses a color code and a letter code to tell you the quality and health of the food you're about to put in your body. Not that they don't allow it or do allow it. It's just this shit's an A, dude. You want to eat that. This is an F. But we're selling it, and if you're buying it, it's fine with us. That's what I want to see more of in our space. And I don't care. Stop with talking about potency. Most of it's a fucking lie anyways. The first time I walk into a dispensary and someone tells me about a 40% THC, I'm like, cool, man. Can I look around and you not bother me with this at all, please? Ashley, what do you think? Do you think that the standardization of that scoring system is something that we could look out for as consumers? Is that a ultimate goal structure here for you guys?
I think it wouldn't be a goal structure for us personally at this time, but I see a future for it, definitely, because consumers need to understand, but it's so hard to get that translation at this point to the consumer when they're still trying to figure out what product to buy to then add on. Because you could, the prior organization I was with, we had a seal of approval, this, showing that this company has been vetted, they've been approved, they're trusted, they've met X guidelines. And we had maybe 4 or 5 companies put that seal of approval on their packaging, but getting that to translate to the consumer when they're still trying to figure out what edible to buy is way too much. So I think it's a little premature right now, but I could see something like that in the future.
That makes total sense. My wife tells me I'm always way too ahead of the curve. It typically costs me a lot of money. I'm typically wrong, and I don't wait long enough for myself to be right. It's a bad habit of mine. And then cannabis is no different. I love it as an industry. I've lost plenty of money in it. I've tried to help plenty of people that probably didn't deserve help, right? But again, I'm trying to do the same thing with this plant. I'm trying to remove the stigma. I'm trying to uplift the plant. I want people to realize that we're not just a bunch of shitless layabouts who smoke joints and can't get off our couches. Like, I bought my first house when I was 19 years old. I'm not here to screw around. Like, I'm here to be in business. But the only way I can be in business is with this wonderful plant. Without it, I'm not here. I can't exist in this space with what I was dealing with previous to finding it. So the passion is there, Ashley. I can see it in you. So with passion in mind, why don't you tell folks what they can plan on hearing about in the second half?
Yeah, we're going to talk about a little more of the CRC, our expansion, as well as some of our cool studies that we have coming up that will ultimately translate over to the consumers, as the industry being able to bring quality medicine to the people.
I'm so hyped to hear about consumer studies. As a consumer, I haven't told you this yet, but I'm, the hand is raised for any future consumer studies. I don't even need the $5. There was, I think, or something like that, right? It was something about, get into it. And just no, pass it down. Just tell me whatever's required, and I'm down to help. I've got some other pupils as well who can be helpful. All right, everybody, look. If you're a home grower and you're somebody who's like, look, I'm going to try this. I want to see what's at home. Where do I go? Where do you go? ColoradoSeedInc.com. My guy, Peter Schweda, man, I'm telling you, I spent 5 minutes with this guy talking to him in Chicago. His passion, similar to Ashley today, is through the roof. The care and effort this team puts into their genetics is freaking insane. I unfortunately live in a prohibition state, but if I didn't, Colorado Seed Inc. would be my spot. Make it yours. Ashley, thank you so much for the first half. I am stoked to get into the second half. And remember, on this show, our goal is always to remove the stigma and uplift the plant to its rightful place in society. As always, we thank our man, Dustin Huxworth, for that, and Fat Nugs Magazine for the idea, because as our first guest, he set the precedent. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next week for part 2, and I get a feeling you're not going to want to miss it.